今日咧，我哋
Members and colleagues, we have already reached the appointed time, and we have already formed a quorum. So let's get started with the first meeting in the year of the Ram. And we have all the officials here, so to save time, let's invite all the officials to be seated, including Mrs. Cherry Chair. And also 2 academics have also been invited to join us. One is Dr. Lui, Professor Lui Tai Lok, and the other one is Professor Ng Mi Kem. So they will join us in our discussion. First of all, let's invite the Bureau Director to walk us through the paper before us. But I'd also like to ask Dr. Ko to say a few words on policies which might have implications on hawker policy, even though this is just part of our overall hawker policy. But then I don't want to see a situation whereby the food trucks will be overshadowing our dealing with the formulation of our hawker policy. But then the floor will still be open to members for questions. Over to you, Dr. Ko. All right, thank you. And welcome to the 2 academics. And I'd like to thank the subcommittee for your previous comments on the government's proposals on hawker policies. In effect, in a sense, we'd like to adopt a gradual approach in managing and controlling hawkers instead of just eradicating them. And many members have also taken part in a brainstorming session. And that provides a lot of assistance to us in the Bureau in formulating a hawker policy. And the subcommittee has also invited the 2 scholars to come along to help us with discussing this issue, so that we'll be able to look at the issue from a social perspective. At different times, different parties and different stakeholders have also talked about hawking or hawker activities. They have shared different views on the issue, and there are some conflicts amongst the different views. I'm sure before and during the Chinese New Year, you must have heard comments about hawking activities at different locations, and there are indeed 2 rather different camps of views in a community. And the demands and aspirations of both camps are also very strong. Given that, in formulating a hawker policy within the administration, hoping that it will be able to meet the aspirations and views of different stakeholders, it will be a daunting task. But then, in any case, the administration would like to ensure that the policy will be able to move with time, so that we will be able to strike a reasonable balance after considering different perspectives and views. We have also considered practices overseas, including Singapore, Taipei City, Bangkok, and the mainland, and even further overseas. And we also have to take into account the prevailing circumstances in Hong Kong. And as I said last time, there was a brainstorming session, and at the brainstorming session, we said that there were certain criteria or principles in developing our future hawking policy or hawker policy. Number 1, we agree that as far as hawking activities are concerned, we should not just adopt a policy of eradication. That's point number 1. We should not just think about eradicating them. Second, we believe that diversification of the local economy is a worthwhile cause, and hence hawking should not be prohibited. And that's also an important consideration in considering our future hawker policy. And therefore, in formulating our hawker policy in particular, where we try to control and manage hawking, we are not trying to eradicate for the sake of eradicating. In achieving important public policies, there are issues that we have to face up to. Thirdly, as to how we are going to regulate and support hawking activities, we believe that we should bear in mind our overall responsibility to the community at large. And at the same time, where hawking is designated at certain locations, we also have to bear in mind the impact on the residents in the neighborhood. So to what extent would the local community need such activities? That's something that we have to bear in mind. But then at the same time, if you look at the geographic location where such hawking activities take place, for other people in the neighborhood who are engaging in other activities, and to what extent will they be affected, we have to bear that in mind. And we also have to ensure that we will be able to discharge our primary responsibility of ensuring environmental hygiene and food safety. And also we believe that hawking activity is also an economic activity, and therefore we do not agree that that should be a form of welfare or poverty alleviation. But then on this point, I also have to link that up with the second point that I made just now. That is, number one, we do not believe that that should not be a form of welfare or a poverty alleviation policy. But then some stakeholders have proposed that we should look at it as a means to promote small business, so that that can also help diversify the local economy. That's something that we have to consider. Fifth, we agree that for traditional or creative cultural activities and or handicrafts, there should be room for the development of such activities. So they should form part of the hawking activities. But of course, we should not equate those with the hawking business in question. But then part of that should be taken into consideration in formulating our overall policy. And of course, in promoting the traditional cultural activities, that should not become a self-fulfilling objective, because they also have to position themselves and find a niche in the community in order to survive. And six, without compromising food safety and environmental hygiene, we also accept that we should keep an open mind towards district-led proposals on local bazaars and their mode of operation. Seventh, as the details of hawking proposition, especially its location, hours, and other conditions of operation, often affect different stakeholders in the local community differently.
So we are of the view that a bottom-up approach is preferred. That is, it is for the proposals to come from the community itself. So we will give extra weight to proposals coming from the local community. Since it is from the local community, they should be able to meet the needs of the community and stand a better chance of getting support from the local community. Number 7, with district support, I think we should consider using existing fixed pitch hawker areas, since they're already in existence in Hong Kong, and due to various reasons, these areas may not be operating very vibrantly. So we believe using these areas would meet with less resistance from the local community, and I think it is a preferable choice to give priority to these areas. Lastly, If there is any district-led proposal with community consensus, then the Bureau is more than happy to give assistance and in liaising with other relevant bureaus and departments. Because very often, if we have a location proposed by the local community, then it is usually more acceptable to the community. And other than the Food and Health Bureau, the approval of other bureaus and departments may also be needed. And we are willing to play a proactive role in liaising with these departments and bureaus. So these principles have stemmed out of our last brainstorming session. On the basis of these principles, we have reviewed the situation in Hong Kong and also existing policy, and we've come up with the following policies or proposals. First, to review the case for issue of new fixed pitch hawker licenses. 2 years ago, we got LegCo's blessing in having funding for the assistance scheme for hawkers in fixed pitch hawker areas. As we all know, some fixed pitches are being reorganized on the basis of fire safety, and we have a voluntary license surrender scheme so that we can have vacant space to address fixed pitches with potential fire hazards. And to improve the operating environment, we also offer assistance to these areas so that the operators can improve the design and fire safety of the store materials. I believe the scheme will be completed quite soon because progress has been satisfactory so far. We believe it is time we reviewed the issue of new fixed pitch hawker licenses. Now there are 43 fixed pitch hawker areas, and then we can, and after we have dealt with fixed pitches with potential fire hazards, we'll be able to tell how many stores are available for allocation to other hawkers, and that will be the right time for us to review whether new licenses should be issued. And we will also follow up the issue of licenses to unlicensed street tradesmen with characteristics reminiscent of our local culture and heritage, such as cobblers. And we may consider providing fixed hawker pitches for these traditional street tradesmen so that they can be licensed and operate properly. And the second proposal is to improve the operating environment of existing hawker areas. Under the scheme I mentioned, we are assisting hawkers to rebuild their stores so as to comply with fire safety requirements and to improve the functions to enhance the store functionality, such as making these stores protected from the rain and to display their products in a more attractive manner. And the third proposal is to consider issuing new Tai Pai Tong licenses. As at end January 2015, there are 24 Tai Pai Tong licenses across the territory. With the support of the relevant district councils, we are willing to consider issuing new Taipei licenses on a pilot basis. Now, this sounds simple, but the process is going to be complicated because we have to ensure that the principles I outlined are fully complied with. And we have to bear in mind community-led and bottom-up approach. That is, if in a particular district, the local community is of the view that a site is suitable for Taipei Tong, and there is support from the community at large, well, of course, they have to satisfy other requirements too, and for this, we're willing to help. For instance, we'll see whether the site is available, and we'll also try to coordinate with other government departments. The fourth proposal is to convert existing market with low occupancy into off-street cooked food center. I'm sure you know the background well. Another subcommittee is reviewing another policy area under the Bureau, and that is wet markets under the management of FEHD. Earlier on, we reported to members at the subcommittee that a consultancy is being done to consider how existing public markets can be made more viable. In the future, such markets may be divided into different categories. There may be markets that are very viable and vibrant, and we don't want to change in the mode of operation. And there are markets that may do very well with some improvements in some aspects. So this gray area is what our consultant is targeting at. That is to see how these markets can be improved in terms of their design and other things, so as to greatly enhance the efficiency of operation. These are public markets that have room for big improvements. Well, first category are public markets that for whatever reasons you don't want to change them because they're already very viable and the community don't want to change its operation at all. And even the public market stores are happy with the operating environment, and no one in the community would like to see any change or any suspension in business of such markets. So for these markets, there is nothing we're going to do about them. And the second category are those that need big improvements, and there is a third category which may not be mentioned by the consultant at all. These markets are those with various unfavorable environment conditions, and that may not be addressed even by major renovation or improvement. So this is the category of public markets that we want to change into off-street cooked food centers. So in existing public markets with low occupancy, we can really carry out a pilot scheme for this. One possibility is to appoint a social enterprise through a contract to take charge of the business planning and daily management of the cooked food center. That is one possibility. The last and also the fifth proposal is to set up district-led open-air bazaar, hawker bazaars, and night markets. We maintain an open mind when it comes to the setting up of district-led open-air hawker bazaars and night markets. We are willing to offer advice to the operator in terms of environmental hygiene. I stress once again that the choice of location should be community-led and bottom-up. I hope that we can come up with a sensible hawker market that can a policy that can balance the needs of different sectors, and we can ensure public safety, hygiene, and without jeopardizing the needs of the local community. And that is what we meant by a diversified approach of business operation. As I said, on the one hand, we do have the duty to regulate the operation of hawker areas, and we're willing to consider community-led bottom-up proposals, and willing to help proponents to coordinate with other government departments and bureaus. However, we need the help of district councils to ensure that there is support from the local community first, so that there can be no resistance. Thank you. Members, I made note that in his budget speech, the Financial Secretary mentioned in para 86 that there are places in Hong Kong very suitable for setting up open-air cooked food centers, so that they can enjoy alfresco dining. So we will ask FHD to consider this possibility, and will consider introducing food trucks, which are very popular overseas, to Hong Kong. So I think members may be very concerned about the introduction of food trucks. The Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development already said that he would be the Policy Bureau responsible, and my bureau and the FHD are willing to give policy facilitation. Because when it comes to the licensing of mobile food trucks, we are one of the departments responsible for giving food licenses. So we will liaise or cooperate very closely with Mr. So's bureau. Any more supplement? All right, I'll see if members have questions. I'm happy to answer. Perhaps I give the floor to the two professors to see if they've got any comment on Dr. Koh's introduction. Of course, if you would rather speak at a later stage, I will reserve time for you. Professor Mi Kam. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for your very detailed explanation. I am, after the last brainstorming session, the Secretary has come out with the proposals here.
There are a number of points that I'd like to make. First, I'm happy to note that we all agree that we should look at the hawker policy as one which is developing. And as to what's meant by a developing policy, well, I'm not sure if you've discussed that before, but then I personally have been working on sustainable development, and it's not just about the economy. We also have to look at our social capital and other aspects. And from that angle, I believe that after meeting economic needs, we also need to have a market mechanism in place. And in the academic sector, we often emphasize, Professor Ng. Well, members are very enthusiastic in asking questions, that's why. So please try to finish in 5 to 7 minutes. Yes, I'll be very brief. So what I'd like to say is I was looking at some discussions earlier on which emphasized on the fact that in formulating the policy, we must not affect the market economy. And what I'm trying to bring up is my time up? No. Please go on. So other than meeting economic needs, there are other means, for example, redistribution of resources, and also using one's ability to help one another. So in English, we call that reciprocity, and that's also a very important part in our economy. So we cannot just use economic consideration as the only consideration in looking at the local bazaar or the hawker policy. I like para 13, item 4. You talk about local bazaar rather than a hawker bazaar, because that's the spirit of the operation, and individual districts should be left to consider their own mode of operation, so that they can consider their own characteristics and position in determining on how that should operate. And also in doing town planning and in planning for local community economy, very often we lament that a lot of the space has been given to the market rather than trying to use other means to meet our economic needs. That's why we believe that by having local bazaar, that will also give us the much needed space, and it's not just for economic purposes. Well, as stated in the paper, there are other considerations, for example, traditional or creative cultural activities or handicrafts and so on. I believe that such space would allow people to establish a good relationship, and that would also help build up more social capital, so that we'll be able to make the place so that the local community would also have its own characteristics, and also that would also form part of the local community. And when people gather together, they'll be able to know that despite the fact that they might not be very rich, they will still be able to make their own community more interesting. So that's very important. So it's not just a district-based approach in considering this development. Well, we also have to ensure that it's sustainable. But then after you have done that, after you have got the space, after you are able to gather together the people, then they can be more creative, and then they'll be able to think about other things that they can do or work together, and then they'll be able to make sure that their community will have their own characteristics. And there are also some vacated or abandoned markets which can form gourmet centers. In fact, we have said that we lack district kitchens. So after dealing with hygiene problems, we should try to do it. And if the community can also learn together how they can make use of the common space or communal space, and how they can resolve the conflicts that they might have in using or sharing the space. Well, in some cases, there might be successes, others failures. So it's a learning process, and it's a learning curve. And through this, we will be able to build our own capacity, and that's also very important to the individual district. And I also am in favor of having more social enterprises to run such operations, because it's not just an economic entity, it's also a place where we can build our personal relationships. I understand that my time is up. But last time when I was exchanging at Brown University, I saw two types of food trucks. One was the so-called gourmet trucks, so it's very large. But then when I tried to try some local traditional food via another food truck, that's very traditional one. So I think we should adopt a two-pronged approach instead of just having one type of food trucks. Yes. Professor Lui. Well, I'll be direct in my response. I agree that for raw hawker-related policies, we face a lot of self-contradictions, because, well, if you try to understand it from the angle of the emergence of hawkers, so I think that's the informal economy in the city. So they are not always law-abiding. So they try to work outside your regulation. So whether you call that the breeding ground for such activities or whatever. And often the most dynamic part of it is that they would just operate in accordance with their own logic, and at certain stage there would be conflicts with your operation, including hygiene, traffic control, and congestion, which might be causing other problems in the community. So if you try to look at hawkers as a form of occupation, I think it's very difficult to try and resolve the problem of unemployment by having more hawkers. In fact, within the same district, there are 3 different spaces. First, we can turn something vacant or some space which has been left vacant into a local bazaar, or we can also enhance the quality of use in some traditional food bazaars. And in other cases, we can have an indoor multi-story market. We can turn it into a multi-story food center. So for any space that is to be reused as a local bazaar, then we will have to focus on how such space can be reused. Well, some might be regularized so that it can be used 7 days a week or just a few days a month. In some cases, we would just turn it into ad hoc hawking or hawker bazaars on weekends or public holidays. So that would also enable us to come up with more pragmatic approaches. For example, how much space is available for reuse and so on. And in some districts, for some existing spaces that can be turned into local bazaars, what's the nature of such spaces? In fact, the usable space will also be affected by the nature of such space. For example, if it's already frequented by many people, then of course there might not be a lot of room for maneuvering. And of course, if you look at past experience, hawkers would always follow the crowds. Or else you would not have seen itinerant hawkers who would rather break the law and still follow the crowds. Because if there is any space where nobody is willing to use, then what's the nature of such space? And also, are you trying to develop something like like a nostalgic crafts workshop and so on? So I think if we are able to think along those lines, then we'll be able to come up with something that will be able to meet public aspirations. So even if there is space available, we also have to understand that sometimes such space might also be itinerant. For example, if a bazaar is becoming very popular, then market forces would again enter, and by that time, then people will question how come such space would only be made available to those who are being subsidized. Why are we not selling the lot so that we can get more economic revenue from that? So that would also involve a major policy. But then as to how the space can be reused, we also have to bear in mind that sometimes such space might just be transitional. So how are we able to make sure that such bazaars and also the hawker policy will be sustainable? So that's something that we have to bear in mind. All right, thank you, the 2 professors, for your comments. Now the floor is open to members' questions. I have 6 members on the list. I'll read out the names: Christopher Chung, Wong Kwok Hing, Raymond Wong, Alan Leung, Claudia Mo, and Raymond Chen. 5 minutes each in the first round. Christopher Chung. Thank you, Chairman. I think hawker problem is a livelihood issue, is how people can make a living. So it's not an academic issue. So you could have written up an article or a journal. It could be a doctor's journal or paper, but then hawker policy has been with us for several decades. In the era of the municipal councils, they've already got very good experience. Well, I used to be an urban council member, and several of us used to be urban councillors. We actually share the sentiments of the hawkers. In fact, hawker policy is a form of welfare, and it also has the effect of lifting people out of poverty. I do not quite agree with what the Bureau Director just said, because when the economy was not doing well, then in order to resolve the unemployment problem, we tried to introduce hawker policy in order to help people make a living. And if you set that aside, then in terms of hawker management and also the licensing policy, you will have to recover cost. And then for urban council markets, if you have to recover cost, then you're going to affect the living of those in the lower rung of society, because hawkers are there to support the grassroots of our community, because they also provide food and goods that are cheap and of low value. And if you look at it from the economic perspective, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a major problem. Then you will have to compare that with shopping centers and others, so that you would always go for recovering the full cost. And also for places where hawkers can operate. Well, in the 60s, we already agreed that we should phase out hawker policy gradually. But now you're trying to reopen the cooked food market and fixed pitch hawkers places and so on. All right, for you senior officials, you live in high-end residential districts, but then when there are hawkers around in your neighborhood trying to cook food in a very noisy manner, then do you think that you will still be able to maintain a tranquil environment for those living nearby? So you're going to affect many stakeholders, including the residents. There will be hygiene, traffic, and other implications. You will have to be very careful. You will have to think twice before you take any step forward. So you should not just try to reinstate the policy. If you think that a Tai Pai Dong or a Pullman's nightclub is very popular, then you will have to identify a suitable location for that. I don't think in Singapore they are trying to do it everywhere. So they would just be designating an appropriate location for that. Well, even in housing estate, we can also designate cooked food centers and so on. Well, I do not object to you making or putting in place a trial scheme at certain locations. But then if you're trying to put in place such cooked food pitches in the wet market, then how are you able to get the support of the residents living nearby? So I don't think we should waste time on this. I think you should focus on your management, because you have not been doing your job. Because in Chunyang Street, there are many pitchers who have extended their business area by some 18 feet. That's because you have not done your job properly. And if you try to reopen more such bazaars, I think one of the characteristics of hawker operation is that it's easy for you to invite them to come in, but then when you try to ask them to leave, it will be extremely difficult. So you will simply not be able to evict them. So it's also not a question of conservation, because if you want to conserve a place, then you can try to put them into a location where there is shoe repair or whatever. But then you should not try to relaunch the hawker policy. And also on food trucks, I don't think you should try to make it such a big deal. So how much money are you going to spend on that? So all you need to do is to introduce or to issue licenses.
Besides, you're being unfair. If you are thinking of food trucks, how come the cooked food sampans are not granted any license since 1969? So for food trucks, do you have places for them to station without affecting people's daily lives? Secretary, do you want to respond? Well, I cannot give a short response, so it's up to you, Chairman. Then why don't you jot down the questions first? So it's up to you, Chairman. Or you can even give me a written reply. It's not going to be short. Okay, a written reply, please. Right, after the first round of questions, I will allow the Secretary some time to answer outstanding questions. Mr. Wong Kok Heng. Chairman, the paper contains 5 proposals which I welcome. And why do I welcome these proposals? because it was myself who proposed the setting up of a subcommittee to study hawker issues. After a long time, the administration has come up with these proposals. While I can't say that they are perfect, still, this term of government has made a breakthrough compared with his predecessor. Can the administration and the chairman consider convening a public hearing so that we can incorporate the views of the community and the hawker sector as well? This is number one. And I have a few questions for the Secretary. First, the question of food trucks. I have openly expressed my concern that food trucks would be monopolized by large chain groups. So do you have any measure to prevent this from happening? Secondly, in addition to food trucks, has the administration considered other very small food carts which may satisfy the need of people's livelihood? These food carts will follow the crowd and is also one of our collective memory. As we all know, we used to have a frozen confectionery bike and also roast sweet potatoes, chestnut, and sticky rice ball, and all sorts of traditional snacks. People just hawkers sell these things using wooden carts. As Professor Lui said, these are illegal hawkers from the perspective of the administration, but they're exactly what is needed by the community. If you only consider food trucks that cost over $1 million a vehicle and ignore the possibility of having food carts and food lorries or food trolleys, can you consider giving policy consideration to these things? And the question of open-air food bazaars, I think we have a great need for such. When I was directly elected members of NT-East, I quoted example of Yat Tong Estate in Tung Chung. Well, people after work would like to buy sticky rice dumpling. But then there was none. There was no hawker there. Now you talk about a bottom-led approach. I think you have shifted the burden to the community. We have a great need for open-air hawker bazaars. I will leave time for the administration to answer. Food trolleys and also open-air hawker bazaars. Since Mr. Walken has time left, I will focus on his questions. First, are we going to conduct a full public consultation? I am open to members' views. There are pros and cons because for some of the proposals here, so long as we have a consensus here, they can be implemented. But as said by the two professors and some members, if we consult the public again on a policy level, then it's going to take time. I disagree with Mr. Zhong that this is a very academic question. If you ask the two professors, I'm sure they say that I have failed in this regard. However, there are very diverse views and even extreme views in society. Is it really desirable to have a public consultation? I am not too sure. Mr. Wong, your comment. This paper seeks to answer a few concerns of members. And having read the paper, I come to the conclusion that it's just to pacify us. It's just like the FS proposal to allow food trucks in Hong Kong. So he raised a simple proposal, and the departments and bureaus will have to work very busily on it. I really hate to read government papers, but as a legislator, I have no choice but to read it. Well, Dr. Koh, since you've become the secretary or an official, you are using very vague terms such as remaining open-minded. Well, the 8 principles are the first one. We should not have a policy bent on eradicating hawker for the sake of eradicating it. What kind of Chinese is it? I think we ask you not to eradicate hawkers, and now you say that you should not have a policy bent on eradicating hawker for the sake of eradicating it. When you're so indirect, why don't you say directly that you're not going to eradicate hawking? This is the way to tackle it. Now, if you're not doing it, what is the legal basis? What do you mean by a policy bent on eradicating hawking for the sake of eradicating it? Do you know your mentality is disgusting? You want to regulate hawkers and you don't want to support it. In all 8 principles, there is no mention of the government's role in ensuring sustainable development of hawkers. Hawkers are required to find out their own positioning and to make themselves sustainable. Then what's the point of having this subcommittee? And all proposals should be bottom-up. That means hawker policy has marked time. It's just old wine in a new bottle. What's the name of your bureau? Food safety and food and environmental hygiene. That's it. All right. You look at the practices in other countries. You just look at the phenomenon, but you have ignored their spirit and objective. I prepared 4 pages, but I haven't got time, so I will just go to your proposals direct. Review the need to issue new fixed pitch hawker licenses. Well, this is a proposal raised by many. I don't know. What do you want here? On what criteria you're going to adopt? The problem we have here is you are eradicating hawkers. You are giving them summary tickets. The cloth hawkers in some shape or the fixed pitches, even for a minor extension of shop front, you give them a prosecution ticket. And improving the operating environment of existing hawker areas, this is for sure. You will be done. You will do it. So what's the point of mentioning it here? Fire risk is, of course, important. And you just focus on fire safety. And what about other things? You have none to say about other aspects. So that fixed pitch hawkers can apply for a separate electricity meters from the power companies. There is nothing for you to do because power companies will certainly do business. Issuing new Tai Pai Tong licenses. District councils, of course, object. Didn't you hear the objection from Christopher Zhong? All right, you are not willing to tackle the district councils and you are using them as a shield. So what you say here are just empty remarks. And what about cooked food centers in new public housing estates? Since you are so expert in management, so you can give them licenses after you have sorted out environmental hygiene. Proposal 4. Converting existing public market into off-street cooked food center. But if there is no pedestrian circulation, how can you ensure business for them? And open-air hawker bazaars and night markets, we've already asked whether you can have something like Taiwan and Thailand, and you say here that you maintain an open mind, that means you are not going to do anything about it. You will only say that we maintain an open mind. Well, Wong Kwok Heng was just apple polishing, and it's so disgusting for legislators to do that. Ms. Claudia Mo, 5 minutes. Please bear in mind that 5 minutes each for both questions and answers. I do know that. Thank you. Well, hawking or hawkers can reflect the culture and customs of society. I'm very grateful to the two professors for having conducted an in-depth study for us. People may think that hawkers are just there to make a living. I think you don't understand the impact of local economic activities on the cityscape. Nobel laureate wrote a paper on whether high-end French handbags could be available in a shopping mall in Russia. Now you have no understanding of this matter at all. Well, there's some Sherpo, sports shoes street and Avenue Street. They started as hawker streets. And I agree with Professor Ng. Please do not just call them hawkers. Please don't think that they are conducting a very basic economic activities. In fact, they should be called local bazaars because they contribute to our local identity. And the Secretary said that he maintains an open mind on reopening open-air hawker bazaars and night markets. I agree that it is a major policy decision. You have a lot of controversies even within the government. On the one hand, you have FGHD to clear Kwai Lam Street market. It is in fact a self-made hawker area. Of course, we understand the feelings of local residents. Every night, their Thai patongs or anyway cooked food stores cooking there with a lot of clamoring. We can understand that, but we should strike a balance. Some people who live there complain that in the morning the area is very dirty with lots of litter. We can understand the problems. Well, it's a very natural place for hawkers and customers to meet. And on the other hand, you talk about food trucks popular in the U.S. selling hot dogs. Well, in Hong Kong, our characteristic snack is fish balls. And for the livelihood of local hawkers, well, for a food truck, it costs at least $500,000 each. And there is the question of getting a license, dealing with air pollution, this and that. And you say that a number of locations can be considered. Well, I think your report is too vague. I understand that you can't be too specific. I do agree that there should be a public consultation. If you think that Thai patongs are good, but they should not be in my backyard.
Or is it that, well, for the more traditional landscape of Hong Kong, well, some of these might be selling iPhones rather than just fish balls. So you will have to give it a more human touch in going about your consultation. Bureau Director. All right. As I said, well, there are pros and cons in conducting a public consultation exercise. But then if members are raw inclined to having a consultation, then I would be prepared to do that. Because in the end, we hope that these policies will be able to meet the public's needs in a community. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to respond to a couple of points. We said that we had an open mind, but then in fact what I said was not just about our open mind on that. For example, if there are certain proposals, then at the district level, there is a need for us to get the district's support for it. So it would be rather hard for us to implement it if there is no public support. But then we also have to ensure that we will be able to meet the different policy requirements, and we'll try our best to help. Next, Raymond Chan. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, let me reiterate one point when we discuss hawker development policy. If we only have the Food and Health Bureau or the Food and Health or the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department to take the lead, that's not enough. I think we should have the assistance and support from the development policy. We have to have, well, today we have the Assistant Tourism Commissioner here. Well, they are here to help, and they are here to see if there is anything which have to do with their policy purview, and then they'll try to help. So it's not really development-led, because it's just food and health, and the role of the Bureau is to regulate. So when it comes to the food trucks, all right, the Financial Secretary said that it's under the Secretary for Economic and Commerce Development. Well, initially the Bureau Director did not seem to be aware of it. No. And then eventually it dawned on him that he had the responsibility. And therefore for hawker policy, it should also have been under the CEDB. And then for Dr. Koh, your policy bureau should come in later. And you should have just provided you should have provided a supporting role for that. So it should not have been you to spearhead the whole thing. So I hope that when we move on, we can have senior officials from the CEDB or even the Bureau Director to be here to discuss with us, so that you can at least give us an impression that you intend to do something about it. I'm not saying that it's not the responsibility of Dr. Koh, because for food and health, I think the only thing that you can do is to dry them up. And if you want them to prosper, and well, Dr. Koh, you might have done a lot about it already, but then, well, there's nothing wrong for you to take the first step. But then the two of you should be working hand in hand before we can see something concrete. And for Proposal 4, for example, the conversion of public market into cooked food centers, all right, that's not very controversial out of the many proposals. In fact, even if you do not ask me, if you just do some pilot schemes at certain occasions, that's fine. But then you talk about the 8 overriding considerations, and if someone suggested a district-led proposal, and if it's supported, then you will try to help other policy bureaus to do it. And then fifth, you said that you have an open mind towards district-led proposals and so on and so forth. All right, if you really want to roll out something, then how are you going to move ahead? And is there any mechanism to enable you to move ahead? So apparently you are saying that, all right, you just come along and then I'll give you support. But then if several of us would like to open a food bazaar, and we have already conducted a consultancy study on that, so that would be rather difficult. I think the administration should play a leading role. You should, for example, if you want to run a night bazaar, or if you want to run a holiday bazaar like the one in Thailand, then you should put together all the stakeholders, and then you ask them to put their heads together and come up with a proposal. And if there is a social enterprise or a non-government organization or just a group of businessmen who try to form themselves into a group or into a chambers of commerce, and then after consultation with the district council, they can say that, all right, we have already fostered a consensus, and therefore, Dr. Koh, we need your help. So how are you going to do it? All right, I'll give you extra time. Well, in fact, we did invite the CEDB to come along before the meeting, and then they just sent the Assistant Tourism Commissioner to come along. But then having said that, if the administration doesn't want to do it, then even if we have the CE here with us, it's not going to work. At least they have said that they have an open mind on this. So I hope that the administration can continue to work on it. All right, I'll give you the floor, Bureau Director. And then I'll continue to invite the CEDB to come. Chairman, even though the paper has been issued by the Food and Health Bureau, but then any paper issued by the government would be a government paper, irrespective of which bureau has issued it. So, well, at a particular point in time, a particular policy bureau might have spearheaded something, but then other policy bureaus will provide their support in due course. So you talk about a form or a mode of operation. I understand that what you're asking for is that if you have to have everything ready in the district, then it might be kind of difficult. So which party should steer the whole thing? All right, for the mode of operation, we have already put out something. For example, in the paper, we have already talked about our stance on district-led local bazaars and also night bazaars. All right, I've already set that out in the paper. So the fact that I've put it out in the paper, it shows that in terms of the policy, we have already given it our green light. So it's not that we have an open mind and therefore we are not going to do anything about it. All right, that's also a response to the remarks made by a member earlier. He is not in the room now. So we have already made it clear that the administration would be prepared to accept this mode of operation. But then the honourable member was also right in the sense that we are not going to adopt an across-the-board approach, saying that only where there is community consensus on this, that we'll be prepared to facilitate that. So as the next step, are we going to have a community-wide consultation? I have reservation about this, but then as to consultation with the district council, I hope that we can do that as the next step. And then by the time when we go to the district council, I'll be explaining to them in detail as to the mode of operation, and then they can come up with proposals on what mode would be most suitable to the district. And then if they suggest that at a particular location, which is farther away from residential developments, and therefore the conditions might be ripe, and the site might not have been put to any good use yet. So they would know the place best. And if there is no competition for the particular site, and if the residents are not living that nearby, and if they're interested in running a night bazaar, then at this stage, they can approach us. And of course, within the district council or any committees under the district council, they can discuss that first. And then they can ask us to come along to see what we can offer in help. I think the Bureau Director has given me this expression. In fact, you should have adopted a similar approach as identifying site for columbariums and so on. So can you run weekend bazaars or holiday bazaars and so on? Well, please give me the time to respond to that. Precisely, I don't want to do it like columbariums, because precisely it's not a bottom-up approach when it comes to columbarium. It was a top-down approach. So you try to mandate it at the district. But then on this occasion, you're trying to do it with an open mind. So I suggest that you should go to the 18 districts, and then they should raise their hands if they're interested in running such bazaars in that district. All right, you will have to wait for another round. Yes, Vincent Fang. Thank you, Chairman. Well, Raymond Wong has left. If he were here, then he would have accused me of currying favor from the administration. In fact, I do support the administration's paper on this issue. I support the overriding principle, but then my question is very simple. I hope that I can give you more time to respond to that, Bureau Director. First, you said that you would be reviewing the case for issue of new fixed pitch hawker licenses. Well, Bureau Director, you know that I've been working on that for a long time. I hope that more pitches could be made available for them to apply. But then in the end, because of district councillors' opposition, well, 3/4 of them were not put out for application. So if everything has to go through the district council and get the district council support, that would be pretty difficult, because in many hawker bazaars, many of them are close to residential developments, and if you have to get the blessing from the district councillors, it's next to impossible. Second, in your paper, you also said that for cooked food pitches, in wet markets where there are vacant stores, then you would be prepared to allocate them to hawkers providing cooked food services. I'm in favor of that. But then I don't quite agree that you should give them to the social enterprises. I mean, no offense to them. But then how many social enterprises have been successful? There are just a handful of them. For example, in the domain under the Housing Authority, I've said many times that some spaces should be made available to the SMEs. All right, in the end, they have taken heed of my advice, and several thousand square feet were left to the SMEs. But then for the domain, most of the space was let to these social enterprises. But then they have not been successful because there is no reason for them to work hard. And if you give these pitches to the social enterprises, then there is a high chance that they would fail. Well, maybe you can say that I'm conservative. And third, about the food trucks. All right, that originated from the U.S. and even the bureau director, when you first worked on it, you should make reference to the experience in the U.S. How did they do it? But then one of the main reasons why Hong Kong is different from the U.S. All right, in the U.S. they have a lot of space available, and therefore they can have compartmentalized food trucks. All right, for food waste and also for wastewater, they have a place to deal with that. But then in Hong Kong, we have a very small place, so how much space can be made available for the operation of food trucks? So please do not think that you can just copy their experience, because Hong Kong is very different from the U.S. So 3 points for your response, please. Bureau Director, first of all, Mr. Vincent Fang, please have a sip of water first and take care of yourself. All right, you said that in principle, we would have to get the district consensus before we would move ahead. In principle, that's right. But then under the proposed scheme, if you look at the system and everything else, I think is somewhat different. And the main purpose this time is to make available some space so that for the evacuation or emergency escape near residential developments, they could be excluded first. And then for the fixed pitches that have been vacated, after we have met all the fire safety requirements, some space would be left behind. And given the fact that such space has been in use as fixed pitch stores, so the objection from the local community would be relatively less. So we are not talking about illegal hawking or itinerant hawking. So such fixed pitch stores would be subject to regular management, and therefore I hope that they can be made available for reallocation.
But will you take out these licenses to allow them to bid for them again? For sure. I just like to put a footnote here. We are not sure who should be granted priority. Some members suggested that assistance to these licensees should be given priority. This is not determined yet, but this will be given some consideration. As for social enterprises, I agree with Mr. Vincent Fang to a certain extent. Will social enterprises will always be successful? Of course, I can't say so. But are they doomed to fail? That is also not the case. I think we are striking a balance. On the one hand, cooked food centers are social activities, but they are also there to satisfy a social need. So for social enterprises, although they are not set up to profiteer, they also have a social responsibility. It's just that they do not use profit-making as a major objective. They use social development as one of the objectives. So I beg to differ in your view that SEs have no incentive to do well. In fact, many SEs have done very well. I hope you can be more open about this. And for food trucks, yes, we have taken this concept from the origin of food trucks. Of course, we cannot entirely copy their model because of various circumstances. We need to come up with an approach or a mode of operation that suits local circumstances. All right, that ends the first round of questions. And second round, we should start with Mr. Wong Ko Heng. Anyway, I asked my own questions first, and I give the floor to the Secretary to respond to some of the outstanding issues, such as those asked by Mr. Christopher Zhou. As we all know, hawker policy is a very, very complicated issue. Otherwise, we would not have invited two professors and Dr. Koh to convene a brainstorming session because interdepartmental coordination may be needed. Some think that they are economic activities or home affairs activities, or maybe a measure for poverty alleviation. As we all know, this is a very complicated issue. Although the administration has put forward a paper which I myself think rather positive, there are still a lot of criticisms, but we have to agree to this fact that the administration has tried to do something, although there are still problems not resolved. I hope members can understand that the administration has difficulties. Take a bottom-up approach as an example. Even if the administration wants to implement a certain policy, it has to go through some formal procedures, such as consulting the district councils. After all, DCs are closest to the local community. District councillors are there to reflect the views of local residents, and if the latter object, then no matter how determined we are, there will always be this not in my backyard syndrome as displayed in the Columbaria issue. Now, I've got photos here of Quailin Street. Now, we have to sort this out. We have to manage illegal hawkers that are not willing to subject to any form of regulation affecting people's daily lives. We have to regulate and manage this kind of hawking. And we want to make hawkers willing to coordinate with the community so that we can have a win-win situation with mutual benefits, and they should be brought under a mode of regulation acceptable to different parties. And I also agree with Professor Ng and Professor Lui. They are another form of economic activity that is beyond the scope of government planning or management. So I'd like to ask the administration, what form of management do you think that it is appropriate? This is the first subcommittee meeting in the year of the RAMP. I'd like to collect views of members so that when we have deputations to express their views at the next public hearing, we can have something more concrete and feasible, because we don't want to scold the government and for the government to scold district councillors for being in the way. All right, Dr. Koh has raised his hands. I'll give him 1.5 minutes to respond. Before I go to reply to Mr. Christopher Mr. Christopher Jones' question, I'd like to say a few words. I think there are two conflicts here. First, on the one side, we have the economy, and the other side, we have social values and local culture and needs of society. I'm sure everyone who is here agrees that it is about striking a balance. Well, we should not only go for economic benefits. I must say that hawkers must be able to find their own economic positioning. Now, if we say that a certain trade should continue to exist regardless of whether it is viable or not, this is not realistic. And if we should just only go for economic benefits, well, this is also not correct. Hawkers should be able to find a niche for themselves in our economy. So the balance is how we can strike a balance between economic value and social and cultural value. Although some members continue to criticize our FEHG staff for controlling and regulating hawkers, and we are trying to strive for them up. To dry them up. In fact, Mr. Wang said we should not have a policy bent on eradicating hawker for the sake of eradicating. How come we are so convoluting? All right, I'll try to explain. We have to regulate hawkers. After all, safety and hygiene are our responsibility, and we have to accept that there is the perspective of development. I'd like to openly express my gratitude to my FEHD colleagues. Now, the responsibility of our FEHD staff is to control and regulate hawkers. If they adhere strictly to that, why should we have this paper? I think we are talking about a regulated or regularized development of hawkers. What you have here, the pictures here show development with no form of regulation whatsoever. So I hope what I propose here represents a balance between economic and social and other needs. And now, coming to Mr. Christopher Jones' questions. We do not agree that this kind of activity should simply be viewed as social welfare. There is no arguing that there is a certain element of social welfare when we relocate on-street hawkers to public markets. There is a small element of welfare, but the focus is not that. The focus is to allow small-scale local economic activities. Mr. Chong stressed a lot adverse impacts on the local community. Well, as I have pointed out in my paper, we must address the adverse impacts on local residents. But perhaps Mr. Zhong has overlooked the fact that we only want to minimize the negative impacts on the community, but to maximize benefits to the whole community. The last point I find it hard to respond. Mr. Zhong asked how come hawking at sea is not allowed. Well, hawking on land is difficult enough, and hawking at sea is even more difficult. I'm afraid this is not included in my current plans yet. Secretary, I didn't ask you to just to respond to Mr. Christopher Chung's questions, but all the questions are unanswered from members. Hang on. Mr. Len Leung, speaking for the first time. Thank you. First, I must commend Dr. Cole for his willingness to take up this issue. Since I first joined the Council, hawker policy is almost a perennial issue. And we often criticize the government for controlling hawkers only without any foresight, with no perspective on development and regulation and planning. Finally, there's something new from the administration after a brainstorming session. The advantage of the brainstorming session is it was very flexible and dynamic. It has made good chemistry, and it has resulted in this paper, which will help us to move forward. After the brainstorming session, there are 5 proposals in this paper. While I don't want to go into the proposals one by one, at least I can say that the administration has surrendered its stance of controlling without any planning and promotion of development, a position which we've always criticized. Finally, there is a more flexible and dynamic and facilitative attitude. But of course, the Secretary was presented it more eloquently than I can now. He said that he's trying to strike the right balance between eradication and full liberalization. And he said that there should be a bottom-up approach, which is also shared by many members here. I hope that the administration can work with this council and also district councils, because if you really want these proposals to bear fruit, you cannot just rely on the efforts of Mr. Cole's bureau. My wish is that after we have a proper paper on the way forward,
I hope that the administration will take on board the 2 scholars' views, and I'm also in favor of holding a public hearing, and then in the end a report can be submitted. So it's the homework that you're going to submit, so that for this problem that has been bothering us for years, I hope that we can see some good development with the submission of the report. I don't really have any question for the Bureau Director. Thank you for giving me the chance to express my views. All right, we are finished with the first round, and in the second round we have Wong Kwok Hing, and the 2 professors would also like to give us their consolidated views. All right, second round, 4 minutes first, and then after this line has been drawn, if there are more members who would like to raise their hands, I cannot guarantee that I can give you 4 minutes, but then I'll try my best. So, Wong Kwok Hing. Thank you, Chairman. Once again, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Bureau Director and his Bureau for doing a remarkable job. In fact, you've done a very good job. In fact, during the past 2 terms of government, they have not been willing to do it. Indeed, we need to have some form of creativity before we can do it. And therefore, I think what the Bureau has done is right, and I support you. Well, just now, we did not have enough time for the Bureau Director to respond to these points. First, for the food cart, which are similar to the carts selling ice cream. So these are hand manipulated food cards. So I'm not asking you to give us your blessing right away. So please consider it. And second, we are talking about some open-air food bazaars. Just now, I cited an example in Tongchong, and it's something that they'd like to get. So can the administration respond to those first? I have further questions, and I'll ask them later. Bureau Director, thank you, Mr. Wong. Well, for the under the concept of food trucks, are we able to accommodate those that are not that sizable, not like what we saw on TV, which can be found in some overseas countries? Well, there is still some room for maneuvering and consideration. But then if in the end it boils down to itinerant hawkers, then for the time being, we really don't have any plan to issue any further itinerant hawking license. But then if you put that aside, well, for itinerant hawkers, because it poses a big problem in terms of management and regulation. If you allow them to choose where to go, then to some districts where they decide to stay, if they are not accepted by the local community, then that would cause a lot of conflicts and disputes. But then for the concept of food trucks, yes, the trucks might be mobile themselves, but then the location is designated. And of course, we might not be just designating one location. It could be, there could be more. But then at least we agree that the designated locations are suitable. So if you look at it from this perspective, it's not just about reissuing itinerant hawking license so that they will be allowed to go anywhere they like. So that can be considered within that context. So long as you're prepared to consider it, it's okay. I'll be very happy about it already. So I'm not going to describe it as itinerant hawking license. That's why I try to use a precise term, and I hope that you'll be prepared to consider it. And I'm happy that you're prepared to consider it, because we're not talking about the size of the food trucks. We're talking about some standards and also some specifications in terms of food hygiene and food safety. So it might not be about the dimension of the food trucks. So when we follow up on that later, we'll be taking that into consideration. And under Proposal 5, actually, we also talk about district-led open-air hawker bazaars. So it's not about whether it's open air. It's about where we can identify such a space or site which will be supported by the district councils and also the residents there. And some members actually said that if we had to go to the district council for their support, then that would be very difficult. So that would also bring up a point which someone said, and Claudia Mo also said that we should go for a public consultation exercise. But then the chairman then suggested that we should hold a public hearing here. All right, if we were to hold a public hearing, and if we can also consult the district councils individually, then that might be somewhat better than conducting a consultation exercise lasting for several months. Because when you talk about consulting the districts, if we all agree on that approach, then here in this council you can hold a public hearing, and then I'll spend some time to meet the chairman and deputy chairman of the district councils in the 18 districts, because the HAD does have a regular mechanism whereby we can meet up with the district council's chairman and deputy chairman. So I can always raise my hand to ask that I be allowed to go and meet with them on one occasion. So we may not have everything ready, but then at least the whole thing should be discussed at the community, and then after most of the issues have been discussed, we can go to meet with them to see how we can further give them the final push. I welcome that approach. by the Bureau Director. All right, we have said many times about holding a public hearing. In fact, when I said earlier, I said that the next meeting could be a public hearing. And I'm glad to hear from the Bureau Director that he would be all ears to the views of the public at the district councils and also at other avenues. But then for hawkers and other stakeholders, please do not leave everything to the administration and then just criticize them when they come up with proposals that are not to your liking. We have to do it ourselves. We have to come up with more effective suggestions and proposals. All right. The next turn should be mine, but then I'm not going to speak for the time being. I'll give the floor to the two professors first. Which one of you would like to go first? All right. You've been very modest. So, Professor Ng, you can go first. Thank you. I think Professor Lui made a very precise description. In fact, it's about the use of public space. Well, I'd like to say that I think, space, all right, if you like a particular dress, you can make 10 and then 10 people can put them on. But then if a space is used for one purpose, then it cannot be used for other purposes. And in some districts, when the space has been used by the market too much, and if it's not able to meet the aspiration of the public, then in those areas or locations, if many of the needs of the public have not been met, then that would give rise to a lot of public discontent. That's why there has been feedback saying that they would like to get more bazaars in order to better respond to the need of the community. All right, these are politics. I don't want to say too much about that, or else we would be criticized for being too academic. But then how are we going to create that space? I'd like to emphasize that I'm someone who has been working a lot on town planning and also community planning. Well, in consulting the district council, it doesn't really mean that you're able to do community planning. We do have community planners and community designers, and they are specializing in community design, and they are good at discussing issues with stakeholders and so on, and they are good at identifying places for organizing different activities. Recently, I have a student who tried to commemorate his or her father who had passed away, and he or she tried to organize activities where itinerant hawkers would be selling certain food items. So they are very good at that. They can always smell whether a particular place is suitable for that, and that would also become a popular place for the public to go. So there are professionals who are able to organize workshops to help create this kind of space, so that there would be a lot of fun in it, instead of just pointing accusing fingers at one another. I think it's a place where there would be a lot of fun, and we need the community leaders to work on that, so that we can build a community together, and then for people to build relationships there. And I'm also in favor of getting more public involvement in this. And when you conduct public consultation, all right, in the academic center, you also need tactics and skills in doing this, and you have to identify your friends, and then if they're your friends, you can talk to them more, and then they'll help you. Or else when you go out, there would be a lot of criticisms, and therefore I'm in favor of doing more public consultation, and it should be done in a more diversified manner. And last but not least, I'd like to respond to 2 points that have been made earlier. In fact, I'm a fast speaker. You'll be given 7 minutes. I don't need 7 minutes. I remember there was a friend who's a banker, and he did an analysis for some social enterprises, and he noted that some of the reasons why social enterprises had not been successful, that's because land had been too expensive. And for social enterprises, well, in fact, if there are markets that can be turned into cooked food centers, if social enterprises are allowed to run these centers, then they might have a chance to succeed. And if they are able to create more people flow there, then they would have a higher chance of success. And some friends would also say that in Yetong Estate, and just last Saturday, I went to Tin Shui Wai, and there was a bazaar there. The reason why there were new developments and why they had these problems. Well, that might not have anything to do with today's meeting, but then it has to do with the government. I think when it comes to new development, you have to make sure that it ties in with the development of the local community. Taking Tin Shui Wai as an example, we have many villages and estates. So there are a lot of farmland. So Tong Chong is the same. So when you do planning, if you had been able to do a better job, then you would have been able to create a more interesting transitional development, so that there would be better integration between the new and old developments, so that people's needs can be met, instead of relying on the market to fulfill those wishes and needs. So it brings us back to the space mentioned by Professor Lui Tai Lok. So please remember, space should not be used to meet the market demands. We also have to meet the needs of the people. So we should not just think about the exchange value. All right, you will have to make sure that, well, at crossroads and also at exit of MTR and so on. Well, when I was small, we used to do that at these places. Yes, Professor Lui? Thank you. Well, I was about to suggest that there should be public hearings and district consultation, but then before we do that, well, for the policy proposals involving some changes as to what kind of activities will be affected, and how many stores will be created and where they're going to be located. If we can put up more details in a consultation, that would be more meaningful, instead of just consulting them on the general concept of hawker policy, or else people will be distracted. And if all we are talking about is just 1,000 or 2,000 stores, then it has nothing to do with poverty alleviation, because we simply cannot resolve the problem of poverty by creating 1,000 or 2,000 pitches. And it's also a question of resource distribution. So are we saying that, well, for those who are worst off, then they'll have the priority in getting the license, and by the time when they can make some money, does that mean that they will have to leave the system and be denied a license? And if you say at the very outset that you're not going to see it as a measure of poverty alleviation, then of course there will be many people who will criticize you. But then there are people who have different aspirations. Just now you gave examples, for example, from food stores to food trucks and food carts, or even Dai Pai Dongs, and also handicrafts stores and so on. All right, there are different forms. So which form would suit a particular district allocation best? So I think these are very important considerations. Well, for my contact with the hawkers, well, that was in the 70s when I used to meet up with many of them. And at the time, the government's attitude towards those selling wet goods and also cooked food, the administration has adopted a very stringent approach towards them. And of course, at the time, we also had cholera, and we had to be very careful about food safety. So you will have to do it in a more focused manner, instead of creating unnecessary aspirations. And also for the 18 districts, as to the space that can be set aside for that purpose, what kind of land is that? And if we are clear about that, then that would be easier for us to decide on how the land should be used for. There might be different types. Sometimes there might be short-term tenancy site available, so it might be put to other uses in the future. But then there might be other sites which have not been put to any use at all. And if you can put in some resources to develop and form the land, you can put it to more meaningful use. So if you're going to create a bazaar with characteristics, then you will have to be more careful in selecting the ones to operate the bazaar.
So if we have more details, then they would not be having too much expectations as they had in the past, because they might then blame you for not being able to address their concerns. So you might as well be frank and honest right from the beginning to address this expectation. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, then I will do my own round of questions. I think there are a few issues for us when addressing this issue. First, views from the local community, because we don't want to have another case of Kwai Lim Street. Originally, members of the public were able to put up with it, but then from 6 stores, it has grown to 30-odd stores. That means the nuisance and noise have increased by 5-fold. And views of the community are such that things should be brought under regulation. So we are quite sure about the government's pressure. So when we want to regulate hawkers in the future, cooked food stores in particular, you may need more communication with these hawkers to let them know the government's bottom line. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng said that people may just hawk food in a wooden trolley. Perhaps the government can specify that no open fire can be used and the maximum capacity for a particular area of street is this and that, so that hawkers can develop in regulated manner without major conflicts with the local community. I think this is a big issue for the current exercise. Professor Ng said that she could envisage a big room for development, and it's also an important thing for people's livelihood. In fact, I myself like to eat fish balls from hawkers. I hope that the administration can balance different elements. I know this is not an easy act, but I hope the administration will done its utmost to address this problem, because I don't really want this issue to come back. Because by then that means the whole issue is already resolved, and this is my hope in the year of the Ram. Dr. Koh, do you have any concluding remarks? I'll give you time to respond to outstanding questions from members. Chairman, I believe I have responded to the majority of questions from members. So I do agree that a public hearing should be convened by this subcommittee when I can find an appropriate time, either before or after the public hearing. I'll go to a meeting between the HAB and the 18 district council chairmen and vice chairmen, and then I will sound out the views of the district councils. Can you please respond to Professor Lui's question whether your recommendations, or rather your proposals, can be more focused so as to manage expectations of the sector? Yes, I really agree with Professor Lui. We say that regulation is important, and then you may think that we have left no room for hawkers to develop. But if we are too open-minded, then there is also expectations to deal with. But please allow me to exchange views with the chairman and vice chairman of district councils first. Now, the paper is open. I think district councils can comment on our current discussion. And even now, if there is any proposal from a proponent, you can approach us and we will see how it can be taken forward under the current legislative framework. You don't have to wait until a new policy is launched. If some district councils have started some proposals, then as we go along, we may be able to accumulate some experience. I think the government's position and views are very clear. If there are no further questions, then I will talk about the arrangements for a public hearing. Para 13 of the paper says that without affecting environmental hygiene and food safety, the government would consider district-led proposals, and the administration is happy to facilitate liaison with the relevant bureaus and departments. So directly elected members may want to liaise with your community and liaise with your relevant district council. The public hearing is tentatively scheduled for the 14th of April from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. because I believe the number of deputations would be more numerous than a previous public hearing. So if you have any organizations or individuals you have in mind that you would like to invite, please let the Secretariat know. And for the two scholars, if you are interested in joining the public hearing, you are also welcome. So Mr. Alan Leung has already mentioned the schedule for the public hearing. All right, if there are no other comments, I end the discussion of this paper now. I thank the Secretary for Food and Health and also his team for their presence. Members, please stay behind. Official team, you may leave. Well, I have just got something to announce. Please note that on the 15th of April 2014, we met for the first time, and we are expected to complete our work within 12 months' time and to submit a report to the panel. Now, we believe that we need to continue our work beyond that 12 months, and we need to seek the consent of the panel for an extension of 6 months and to seek the consent of the House Committee as well. According to the decision made by the House Committee on the 15th of November 2013, if a subcommittee would like to seek an extension, if there are other subcommittees on the waiting list, and if the House Committee thinks fit, then the subcommittee may have its term extended for another 3 months so as to conclude what it is doing. If necessary, the subcommittee can then be put on the waiting list for reactivation later. So can we seek the HC's commission that the HC's consent that our term be extended for another 6 months? It could also be a arrangement of 3 plus 3. Okay? Thank you. Then meeting adjourned.